What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and today I decided to choose Absolute Chaos and bring back the 5-color control deck. Now, definitely different from the modern versions that you're used to if you play that format, but nonetheless still very powerful, and I'm pretty excited to go over it today. So before we get too deep into it, of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos like this, along with other modern videos and essay type videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell. And go ahead and follow the link in the description of this video to the Discord server. And go ahead, follow it, join over there, all that great stuff. And of course, by subscribing and ringing the bell, you get to get notified when I live stream on YouTube as well. So all great things, all fun things. Probably even going to look into playing this deck because it looks really sweet. So we have a 5-color control, as it is dubbed, by Devin Straub, who took it to a 5-0 to finish in a 5K RCQ 1 slot event at the beginning of April. And buckle in because we're going to go for a ride. So 5-color control, pretty self-explanatory of like the name. Like we're just playing some pretty decent control pieces while also playing just a super high value control deck. So starting like we have creatures, you have like 4 Sylvan Carrier to start. Ramps, it's got 3 toughness, so it does block fairly well. Hexproof, so it's not going to get taken out by a creature plus a spell. Just does a lot of like good blocking, gets you to the mid and late game as well. Again, being able to fix your mana and also block very well is a super high plus. A few one-ofs in Valky, God of Lies. Of course, you can cast the other side, a Tibalt Cosmic Impostor when you need it. Valky can go ahead and steal a creature card out of your opponent's hand, and then, if you pay an additional amount of mana equal to that card's converted mana cost, Valky can turn into that card. So you could probably take like Shieldreds and then pay like 4 mana, and you have a Shieldred thanks to like your Valky and stuff. Of course, on the flip side, Tibalt Cosmic Impostor. I mean, this card was pretty good when people were cheating into play on like turn 1 and turn 2. Still pretty good in my opinion now, because you're able to actually play cards exiled with it. You're able to get to a pretty quick ultimate where like exiling all graveyards and having some relevant graveyard hate as well, along with dealing with some creatures and stuff with the backside, and then also being able to cast them, which is neat. You have Selfless Glyph Weaver, which you can exile it to give creatures you control indestructible until end of turn, and the flip side being essentially a wrath that lets you choose a creature or planeswalker and then destroy all other creatures or planeswalkers. I believe there's like a wrath that of course, I cannot think of off the top of my head that does what Deadly Vanity does. Essentially, like tragic arrogance, but your opponent is probably never going to get to keep any other things because your things are awesome. Hostage Taker is a card that has been AWOL for a while, since its time in Standard. I don't think you ever really saw it play, even like in the beginning of Pioneer and stuff. But when it enters, you exile another target creature or artifact until it leaves, and then you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled and spend mana of any color to cast that spell. Some of these black cards are kind of awkward because Omnath, the kind of like the linchpin of like the 4-color control decks in Modern and definitely so in Pioneer, doesn't make black mana, but Hostage Taker, still a very good card. And as you'll find out here in a second, with a few of these cards, like Elesh Norn just combos very well with them. With Elesh Norn and play, Hostage Taker can take up to 2 things. And then, of course, just getting to generate a ton of mana with Omnath, hitting your land drops with some of these other cards and so on. You'll be able to essentially just cast like some of your opponent's creatures and or artifacts, and eventually getting to the point where, you know, just getting them off the table is fine, and then getting them on your side is just a bonus. Omnath, probably one of the most boring like 4 mana like finishers in like any format, just for the fact like you play this card, and if your opponent like doesn't have an answer for it, it just absolutely runs away with the game. Like you have cards like Ragavan and Modern that do not that don't do this, but like are definitely like cards that are like a must answer. And Omnath is absolutely a must answer and a half. From getting to play your first land to gain 4 life, obviously stunning a lot of like of the work that a lot of the aggressive decks put in. If you're able to play Omnath, getting to also be a 4/4 body blocks a lot of the creatures in the format, as well as trading up or trading down with them, like trading for a card and a creature in the worst case. Also getting to add a ton of mana with the second land drop, and then deal with planeswalkers, and eventually like dealing with your opponent as well, hitting your third land drop. With Elesh Norn to kind of wrap all this up. Elesh Norn able to essentially allow your permanents or anything that is triggered from a permanent entering the battlefield to trigger an additional time, while permanents your opponents control that enter the battlefield don't trigger, which we will see like a few of the cards that you will see in the format. This deck is deciding to play as well, but until we get to those, just know that Elesh Norn like doubles up on your ETB triggers uh, while shutting off your opponents, essentially. And this also works like if you have an Omnath in play and you play a land and you have an Elesh Norn in play, the Omnath will trigger twice. And Omnath's ability just says that if it's the first time this ability is resolved, you gain 4 life. If it's the second time, you add mana. If it's the third time, you deal 4 damage. So really, Elesh Norn with like one land gains you 4 life, gets you 4 mana, which obviously opens up the door for a lot of these other spells. And a little bit of foreshadowing. Omnath's like ability to add mana helps us play another card, and kind of like a card that has been a staple for like these 5 color decks since the beginning of Pioneer, and that's Bring to Light. Bring to Light lets you search a library for a creature, instant, or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast the spell. Exile that card, shuffle your library, you may cast without paying its mana cost. If you play like 2 lands and you make mana with Omnath, you already have a Bring to Light potentially for at least CMC 4 or less. Add black mana to the mix, and you're able to go and get Elesh Norn from your deck to start doubling up on these Omnath triggers. Going and get like Hostage Taker or like a Glyph Weaver if you absolutely need it. I believe it works. So like if you have Bring to Light and you bring to light for a card, you can actually go get Glyph Weaver or Valky and cast the backside of the card. Just because uh, Bring to Light just cares about having basically like getting a card that costs less, and then you can cast either side of it. So you can go get a Tibble. You can go get Deadly Vanity. So essentially, you have like a 5 mana, like one-sided, like 1.75 sided sweeper, which is really like that's really cool. And a thing that definitely comes up if you want to play any kind of Bring to Light deck, and kind of like why you play like Valky and like Selfless Glyph Weaver and things like that. Uh, on top of that, too, you can go get a Slaughter Games. Can't be countered by spells or abilities. You name a card and you search your opponent's hand, graveyard, and library for any number of cards with that name, and you exile them, and then that player shuffles their library. Of course, good into pinch when you're playing against like the Greasefang decks, even when you're playing against, like Lotus Field, you're able just to kind of, take their best card. Like it's naming a non-land card, so like it's not that great because a lot of the other like cards, like you're able to just name a card and get up to 4 copies of said card. But Slaughter Games definitely has its spots, and just being a one of, it's like in a way free to play, especially when you have like 4 additional copies and like Bring to Light and stuff like that to go get it. You have Extinction Event, which you choose odd or even, and you exile each creature with converted mana cost of the chosen value. You have Prismari commands, lets you ramp a little bit, gets you like different colors of mana by getting you create a treasure token, shatter an artifact on your opponent's side with like some of the Gruul like vehicle stuff, like pretty impactful to say the least. Getting to draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, hit land drops, maybe dig for like an Omnath or any one of your like pretty key enchantments that you can play in the deck, or just getting to deal with like a small creature or whatever with the 2 damage. Escape to the Wilds is kind of like was a combo with Omnath Locus of Creation, because you had cards like Fabled Passage, and as you see, like in the mana base, you are playing 4 Fabled Passages in this, where like on turn 5 you could like play a fetch land, the Fabled Passage, go and get a land. You end up making mana, and then you have like 4 mana left over, and you play Escape the Wilds. You get to play an additional land, and then you essentially get to exile 5 cards, and then you play cards exiled this way until the end of your next turn. So essentially, like you cast Escape the Wilds for free and more than likely got to trigger your Omnath a third time, which meant that you got to deal with any planeswalkers and deal damage to your opponent. Very powerful in Standard. I could definitely see this being very powerful in Pioneer as well if your opponent's just not able to stop your snowballing. One artifact and it is Courier's Briefcase. It makes a 1/1 when it enters, and then it acts like a treasure token where you can tap sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color. And of course, like kind of getting to play into Omnath's and ETB abilities with like lands. You can pay one of each color, tap and sacrifice it to draw 3 cards, which is like a way that you can like refuel and things like that. Going to the enchantments, some of your like your interaction for some of the early and aggressive creatures, you have Chain to the Rocks and you have Leyline Binding as ways. I mean, you are a 5-color control deck. You're probably going to reach full domain like pretty easily over the course of like 3 or 4 land drops. So Leyline Binding a lot of the time is probably going to be like 1 to 2 mana, maybe even 3, which is like pretty manageable honestly, especially in like Pioneer. So getting to have access to this card as like a cheap catch-all removal for any of your opponent's stuff, very very nice. On top of that, Fabled Melee Breaker is just probably one of the best cards that you can play. It's obviously played across Modern and Pioneer, and it's just it's insane. It maybe not be like super super busted, but the fact like the things that it just kind of like gets the combo with on top of really getting the combo with itself is pretty amazing. The fact that you can just like replay like hostage takers and things like that, and like uh, not really selfless Glyph Weaver because I'm pretty sure Glyph Weaver is just because of like Bring to Light, but getting to like copy a hostage taker and like take a thing every turn and just give yourself the ability to cast, essentially making the thing that you take cost 1 more to like play on your side, and then just like freely getting to like run your token into your opponent's board or getting for damage and stuff like that. So definitely very powerful. And for those of you who don't know, and I will always bring it up for as long as Fabled and Mirror Breaker is a legal magic card, if you have 2 reflections of Kiki-Jiki on the battlefield, you can make a infinite number of tokens equal to the amount of mana that you have. So you could, in theory, if you have like 8 mana and you have 2 reflection of Kiki-Jiki, at your opponent's end step, make 8 copies of Reflection of Kiki-Jiki on tap, and then you just have like 8 2/2s that can attack that turn. So yeah, I mean that's pretty cool, and of course just like getting to discard like spells that aren't relevant to hopefully draw and hit your land drops, or if you're flooding out to get rid of those excess lands to find either lands of the colors that you need or try to get Omnaths and things like that. The mana base, which is probably the most interesting part of the deck. You're playing one Boseiju because I feel like every deck that plays green has to play at least like one Boseiju. Not even playing like another one on the sideboard, which I don't think is necessarily weird, but that's normally where you end up seeing another one. You have 4 Fabled Passage, which lets you search for a basic land card and put into play tap. But you shuffle your library, but if you control 4 or more lands, you untap that land. So if Fabled Passage is your 4th land and you go and fetch for a land, and it comes into play, it will come into play untapped. You have a forest, an island, plains, a mountain, and a swamp. You have one of each basic land in your main deck to go search for it. It seems like overkill when you have 4 Fabled Passages for 5 basics, but it ends up working out. And some amount of the time, you're just going to want that fetch land to naturally trigger the second landfall ability on Omnath before you can hit an Elesh Norn, and just all of your single lands end up like getting you to like that mana creation. Of course, we play a bunch of triomes. There's Jamir's Garden, the Naya triome, the Temur triome and Ketria triome, Rafine's Tower, which is the Esper one, Ragnar triome, the Jeskai one, Spar's Headquarters Bant, Xander's Lounge, the Grixis, and Zayator's Proving Ground, the Jund one, as well as some green shocklands and stuff in Temple Garden and Stomping Ground. You have a Sacred Foundry, which of course fulfills like the mountain requirement for Chain to the Rocks, which is why you see a lot of like these like mountain triomes and stuff, because you need mountains to enchant with Chain to the Rocks to be able to hit your opponent's things. Of course, like an added benefit to having these triomes and stuff is that they eventually do cycle and turn into cards later if you do not need them. The sideboard, Pithing Needles, Rending Volleys, Aether Gust, Disdainful Stroke, Dovin's Veto. These cards are, I mean, is exactly like what you expect from like a sideboard. Maybe like probably one or two more like Rending Volleys or maybe like another Aether Gust and things like that. But for the most part, I would say pretty standard for any deck that is able to actually, play in this color combination. Lavinia is really interesting. Uh, I'm assuming a lot of for the Lotus Field decks because they're able to cast a lot of like their big spells, and they really only ever have like two, maybe three lands in play unless you like force them to wait because of like the Lavinia and things like that. Reckoner Bankbuster for some of those like, extra grindy matchups to get you some extra cards, and then also a 4/4 body and a 1/1 that is able to actually crew the Bankbuster is pretty sweet. Rest in peace for those pesky graveyard decks. And an Emrakul the Promised End because you are just going like super big over the top. Like it is definitely not out of the realm of possibility to just hit your land drops, trigger an Omnath once, and then like you're just casting an Emrakul like for the most part relatively like earlier than obviously like turn 13 or whatever. I know Emrakul does cost less for card types in your graveyard, which you can easily get to just by like you probably end up with like a creature, like a random spell, an artifact, enchantment, land. I believe that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can get like 6 types in the graveyard out of the possibility of 10 or 9 now. So you can make this like a 7 mana card, and like triggering an Omnath means that you're able to play this and then also leave up mana as well, which is pretty cool. And that is the 5 color control deck. Definitely longer than I thought it would be, but this deck is very interesting. A lot of these like Bring to Light decks have some interesting like build arounds and things like that, and definitely Bring to Light and Omnath kind of like tie the room together. Well, they definitely set the stage, and the helpers, the good Bring to Light targets and the Elishnorn and stuff like that really tie the room together. That's probably a lot better of an analogy than what I was starting with. Holy crap. But this deck is definitely interesting. Obviously, it's really not that highly played in terms of like metagame share and stuff. But decks like this usually tend to take some of the slower decks like the Woodshed. Like I could definitely see this being a pretty good deck against like Rakdos if Rakdos really can't put any meaningful clock into play super early. Because like even if you disrupt it, even if you take like an Omnath, obviously there's 3 more Omnaths. Like they're not very likely to draw some of these like creatures and stuff like minus like Sylvan Caryatid. And once Caryatid hits the board, like you're not really able to deal with it. And just like the color fixing plus like being able to block pretty efficiently as well is kind of like will tear you up. And even if you find a way to get rid of it, if it helped cast like 2 or 3 spells, it definitely did its job. So this is the 5 color control deck for Pioneer. I plan on trying to play this deck in some capacity, whether on stream or in a video this coming week. So if you want to see that video, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell, which will also notify you when I go live on YouTube and stuff. So really cool. I hope to see you all there. I hope to see you all in future videos, etc., so on and so forth. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.